Hey guys, Matt here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at these LED strips and then installing them on my car. So these are 1-foot waterproof LED strips, and these are the color white. So what you do with these is you stick them under your headlights for a nice white LED sort of look. You get 2 of them. I'll leave a link to them in the video description. Let's take a closer look at them. So on the front here, you have a bunch of LEDs, pretty self-explanatory. And then on the back, you have 3M tape, which you'll use to stick on. And then on the end, you have red and black leads, which you will connect to your car. I'll go over the connection later on when I'm actually installing these in my car. So these are waterproof, so there's nothing you need to worry about. And these are 12 volts, so you can plug them straight into your battery if you'd like, but I wouldn't do that. I would wire it to something that already uses 12 volts, but we'll go over the wiring later on. So let's go ahead and install them. The materials we're gonna need to install these LED strips is some wire and heat shrink, the 2 LED strips, a flathead screwdriver, a wrench, wire strippers, and electrical tape. Next, go into your car and find the lever to pop the hood and pull it. Then release the safety and open the hood. Grab the LED strip and plan where you want it to go in relation to the headlight. Now let's figure out how we want to wire the LED strips in the car. I wanted these LED strips to be on all the time when the car is on. So what I did was I chose to wire it into the fuse for the cigarette lighter. Since the fuse is in the fuse box inside the cabin of the car, I have to grab a wire and go through the firewall. As you can see, there's a grommet right here where I can easily tap into because somebody else already tapped into it when they were installing the starter for my car. So I'm just going to follow the same route that they did and just branch off of it. The best way I found to get through the firewall is to take a screwdriver and just electrical tape the wire to it. And then all you have to do is take the screwdriver and stick it through the firewall. Now this might be a little hard depending on your firewall and your grommet, but all you want to do is just push it in straight. Make sure it's straight so it doesn't damage any other wires or any other things inside the firewall. Then go on the other side of the firewall and find where your screwdriver is. And then grab the wire and pull it from the screwdriver. Once you have enough wire, go ahead and undo the electrical tape from the screwdriver, and then you can just simply go ahead and pull the screwdriver out from the other side. Clearly this blue cable is not long enough, so what we're going to do is extend it with this yellow cable. To do that, we're going to need to first strip both ends of each cable. Then take some heat shrink and slide it over one of the cables so that way we can use it later when we bridge the 2 connections. Now take the blue cable and the yellow cable and put the 2 copper ends together, and then twist the cables together. Once the cables are twisted together, flatten the copper part so that way it's flush against the 2 cables. Then take your heat shrink and slide it over to cover the connection. Next, take a lighter or a heat gun and then apply heat to the heat shrink to create a firm and solid connection between the 2 wires. Now that we have a more than long enough cable, let's go ahead and feed it through to the headlight. Now lucky for me, this car had a car starter installed, which means that the previous person had to go through the firewall anyway and reach the battery. So what they used was this black tubing. So I just fed my wire through along the black tubing. Now this is helpful because this black tubing can resist a lot of heat, which is good because wires should not be exposed to heat at all, and the engine bay creates a lot of heat. Now the tubing does go all the way to the battery, which is unnecessary for me. So what I did was I took the cable as much as I needed it along with the tubing and just left it there. Now to keep the wire in place, I took some electrical tape and put it in front and behind the wire to keep it in place and from moving around. Then I just tucked the electrical tubing back into place where it was, put everything back into place. Next we need to find our grounding spots for each LED strip for each headlight. For the left headlight, lucky for me, there was a bolt and a grounding spot already. Now for the right one, I had to search a little bit harder to find a ground spot, but luckily I found them because they're not that hard to find. I'm just going to use this bolt right there. Next, take the LED strip and separate the 2 leads, just enough room so you can strip the 2 wires and attach 2 other wires to it. Next, grab a cable that's long enough to stretch from one headlight to the other. This is going to connect our positive leads between each LED strip. Now grab some heat shrink and stick it over the positive lead on the LED strip. Then grab one end of the wire that's going to stretch across both headlights and twist the two wires together. Then flatten the copper/silver part to make it flush with the wire and slide the heat shrink over it. Next, take a lighter or a heat gun and just shrink the heat shrink to make a nice and solid connection between the two wires. In addition, we need to ground the LED strip to the car or connect the black wire to something. So we need to grab another wire and use the method that we used for every single wire and connect it. So you need to strip the wire, slide heat shrink over one lead, then twist the two wires together, then slide the heat shrink over both connections, use a heat source and compress the heat shrink to make a nice and solid connection. Now we're ready to feed the wires into the engine bay to connect to the parts that we need. So grab the left LED strip with its wires that we attached, the green and brown. The wires colors are depending on which ones you choose, but in my situation, they're green and brown. So just feed those into the engine bay, and then we will decide where they go from there. I laid the LED strip underneath the headlight. It is not glued down or secured or anything, it's just laying there. Take the ground wire that is going to the LED strip and then trim it down to length to reach the ground spot. Now I chose this ground spot near the left headlight because it already had wires going to it, so I was sure that it was a ground spot. Now in my case I used a green wire just for easeability of color coding and finding out which one is the ground wire, and then I just stripped it down so that way all of its contacts are exposed. And then I twisted it a little, so like a hook, so it can hook on to the ground screw, and twisted it to make it a solid piece of metal wire and put it back into a hook. Next I undid the ground screw a little so that way I can stick my wire in there along with those other ground wires that are in there. We can't leave the ground screw just untightened like that, so I grabbed the wrench and tightened it back down so there's a nice and secure connection between all the ground cables that are going to it, in addition to our ground cable going to the LED strip. That took care of grounding the left LED strip. Now we need to provide the 12 volts that it needs. So I took the brown wire, your color may be different depending on which wire you used for the red lead going to the left LED strip, and then ran it to the right headlight because that's where the wire from the cigarette lighter fuse is right now. We can't just let this brown wire be dangling, so what I did was I took some zip ties and zip tied the wire around the front bumper to secure the wire so it doesn't move. And as you can see, the brown wire is now over by the right headlight. Next, let's trim this yellow cable. This is the cable that's coming from the fuse for the cigarette lighter. So let's go ahead and trim it down because it's unnecessarily long. Now let's take care of the right LED strip. So to start off, first strip both leads, both the red and the black. Then straighten out the metal strands coming out of each wire as well as twisting them to make them stronger. Next, grab another wire. This wire is going to be for the ground for the right LED strip. Now to match the color coding concept that I went with on the left one, I grabbed another green wire. Now this wire is going to connect to the black wire of the LED strip to provide it ground. So like always, slide over a piece of heat shrink over one of the wires, then grab the other wire and twist them together, and then fold the wires flat and slide the heat shrink over the wires. Then take a heat source and shrink the heat shrink over the wires to provide a nice and solid connection. The red wire also needs another cable connected to it, so repeat the same process as we always do and attach a wire to it. Now you should have two wires coming out of the LED strip. One will go to 12 volts and one will go to ground. Now we're ready to connect the right LED strip. So feed the wires in underneath the headlight and into the engine bay so that way we can connect them to where they need to go. And like the other side, I just laid the LED strip. It's not attached or anything, it's just laying there for now. So now let's go ahead and connect the LED strip to where it needs to go. To start off, let's connect the ground wire, which in my case I color coded it to green, but it's whatever wire is coming from the black lead of the LED strip. Like the other side, let's connect it to a ground screw. The final thing that we have to do in the engine bay is just connect all the positive wires together. So in my case, I just have to connect the 2 yellow wires and the brown wire all together, because the brown wire is going to the left LED strip for its 12 volts, and one of the yellow wires is going to the right LED strip for its 12 volts, and then another yellow wire is coming in from the cigarette lighter fuse. Speaking of the cigarette lighter fuse, that's the next thing we're going to do after we heat shrink these wires all together. My cigarette lighter fuse was found inside the cabin, but your car may be different. It may even be in the engine bay. Next, what I did was I pulled off the cover off of the fuses and located where the cigarette lighter fuse was. Then I used these fuse plug pliers that were already with my car and pulled out the fuse. Next, I took the wire that was going to the LED strips and just stuck it in one of the ports where the fuse goes. And then I just jammed the fuse in there. So basically what this is doing is it's tapping into the fuse's electrical current. Now it's time to see if they work, and they do work. Now to turn them on, all you have to do is just turn the key and they just turn right on. If you were wondering where I got my fuse pliers from, they were just in the fuse box that was located in the engine bay. Finally, all that's left is to just close the hood and then stick on the LED strips permanently. Alright, so to stick on these LED strips, I recommend peeling off the backing slowly, inch by inch, or centimeter by centimeter, whatever you prefer, and using a flat screwdriver. Use the flat screwdriver to apply force to the LED strip to force it down and to create a good adhesion to the surface. I am really happy on how these LED strips turned out on the car. They really provide a little something to the headlight, and when you're driving in the daytime, when you have your daytime running lights on, these are a great addition and provide a great accent. If you're interested in more cool car upgrades, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. If you're interested to know why I'm using a toothbrush and toothpaste on my headlight, click on the eye in the upper right hand corner of your screen to find out.